everyone. Welcome to Customer Care Through the Customer Journey. I am Katie Robert, and I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Brooke Sellis.
Hello.
Um, so, Brooke and I are just going to bring you some really good information about how to reach your customers through every single stage of the customer journey. Brooke, did you want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we kick it off?
Yeah, I popped this into the chat, which you should see on the right-hand side of your computer screen. But as we go through, you'll probably have questions. Definitely ask us those questions. If you could pop them into the chat, we will get to them at the end of today's presentation. We'll also send out a replay link to everyone, so don't worry about that. And will we send the slides? Can we send? Well, we can send a PDF of the slides too as well, right? So we'll make sure you get all the things. So all we want for now is just your attention, hopefully some laughs, and definitely your questions. So pop those into the chat. And like I said, we'll get to those at the end.
All right. Well, if you're ready, here we go. So as we mentioned, this is Customer Care Through the Customer Journey. Brooke is the CEO and founder of B Squared. I am the CEO and co-founder of Trust Insights. And just a little bit about us in case you're wondering. I'm a dog mom. We founded Trust Insights in 2017, and I focus primarily on change management and data governance. And you can see that I listed those things in order of priority, dog mom being first.
I did the same, and I am a horse mom. We founded B Squared Media in 2012. And I teach a digital marketing course at the University of California in Irvine virtually. I'm actually in New Jersey, so I do not fly out there every so often, which would be fun, but I do not. So, yeah.
All right, so getting into it. So why are we talking about this? In the latest CMO survey, which came out in February of 2022, if you're not aware, the CMO survey comes out twice a year in February and August. In February, customers were prioritizing superior product quality as the number one thing that they cared about. So you can see product quality, excellent service, trusting relationships, customer experience. Those are all the things that they care about the most, whereas superior innovation was important, and then positive impact on the world came in as important, but the least important of all of these things. And so this all ties into what Brooke is going to be speaking about in terms of that customer experience. So this is just sort of setting the stage for why we're here. Now, with that, we also see on the other side, data analytics investments skyrocket to the top priority, with digital marketing investments increasing across the board. And that's where understanding your customer journey comes in. And so if you are getting a certain amount of budget, if you have certain KPIs, if your company is investing in data analytics, why wouldn't you want to make sure that you're investing in the right thing? So Brooke, what is customer care?
Yeah, I think, just going off of what Katie just showed you with those last two slides, like this is the time to strike. If you really want to understand the voice of the customer, then you need to start thinking about how you can get the information or the data behind the voice of the customer and the tools, the data that you'll need for that analytics to look at that as a whole and then make innovations with your product, services, or whatnot. So that's what we're going to go through today. So when we talk about customer care, I know what we mean, but Katie, I kind of want to bat it back to you for a second. When you talk about customer care, what does it mean to you? Because I think a lot of people have a lot of different definitions for customer care.
Yeah, in my career, I've never focused specifically on customer care, but it's always been an element of the different jobs. And so for me, it's always been exactly what it sounds like, literally taking care of the customer, not in the customer's always right and just sort of putting up with everything, but in the what can I do to make sure that the customer has the most information, that they feel like they're getting the right, services or product for the problem that they have, that they can find me when they need me, kind of a thing.
Yeah, so Chris actually just asked a great question in the chat, which I'll bring up now because it kind of underscores the point I'm about to make, which is How is customer care different from customer service? That's a great question. And we think of customer care encompassing the entire digital customer journey. So many of you will know the flywheel from Jim Collins' book, From Good to Great. This is a flywheel that B Squared Media created with customer care in the center. The book with Jim Collins had growth in the center. And the reason why we have customer care in the center is because we think done correctly, it actually feeds into that attract, engage, and delight, all of the stages of the digital customer's journey, but it's also self-propelling. And the reason why it's self-propelling is because customer care is proactive, right? We're talking about pre-purchase, attracting some of those strangers, all the way through to loyalty and retention, which is what a lot of people would call customer service or customer support, which is oftentimes reactive versus proactive, right? Because you might be talking to that customer one time for an issue or a question and not over and over again. So in our opinion, and in our business specifically, we're talking about social-led customer care, but it's essentially the service of responding to the specific demands, questions, and pain points of any of your would-be, your potential customers and your current customers throughout the entire customer journey. And if we do it correctly, what ends up happening is those satisfied customers bring us to new customers. They help us connect with new people who are potential customers. And then hopefully we can converse and have conversations with both almost customers and would-be customers and actual customers that lead to conversion. So again, that's kind of why it's like that self-propelling flywheel that we all have come to love from Jim Collins' book. And just from a quick operational standpoint, there's a 5-step process that we use at B Squared Media when we talk about customer care. So this makes it really easy, even though it's not that easy, right, to get your arms around the whole thing. But essentially, you want to figure out what are those frequently asked questions that we get throughout the entire digital customer journey, which we're going to go through today. What are some of the workflows that we need in place to handle those conversations that we're hopefully having with potential customers and current customers? How do we triage that conversation? How do we know how to respond correctly with the right information at the right time for the right person? And then when we're looking at the conversations that are happening, how do we triage those as well? So we have our processes and our workflows, but looking at all of that data that's coming in from the voice of the customer through the conversations that we're having with them digitally, or in our case through social media, how do we tag and code those conversations to make sure that we understand how much of the conversation is about product B, how much of it is about product A, and why is product C not getting talked about at all? And then, of course, Katie's expert level of analytics, we've got to analyze, right? We've got to figure out what of this data that's coming into us through these conversations is important, meaning what is actionable. So how can we take this information that we're receiving about the voice of the customer, their interests, their desires, their preferences, and what can we do with it to make it actionable? And then that is how we do step 5, which is innovate based on the voice of the customer. So what we are trying to really understand in layman's terms is, what does the customer want and how can I give them that to then lead to giving more customers what they want, having more sales, and just being more of a success overall.
And so, Brooke, you said something really interesting, which brings us, which is a really nice segue into what is the digital customer journey and why are we talking about the digital customer journey in concert with the customer experience? And as you were going through the process, you mentioned reaching people where they are at that moment. And that's where the customer journey comes in. And so the customer journey looks like this. Now, some companies may use a truncated version of this. They may stop at purchase. But when we think about customer journey, we really want to take it beyond purchase and bring it into ownership, loyalty, and evangelism. And so we're going to go through all of these different stages of the digital customer journey. So we have awareness, which is when people are first learning about you. We have consideration, when they may have learned a little bit and now they just need more information to see if you're going to be the person who solves their problem. Evaluation is that pre-purchase step where they might have you and a few others on a short list. Purchase is what it sounds like. It's when they actually purchase something. But don't stop there. Bring it to those next few phases of ownership. And that's where that more traditional customer service comes in of, making sure that people are getting the support they need, answer the questions. How do I use this? The loyalty of you've answered their questions and now they want to do more. They want to be a repeat customer. And that's why that line from loyalty goes back to purchase. And then evangelism, where they essentially start selling for you by word of mouth. And so with that, what we wanted to do in order to tie in the digital customer journey with customer care and the customer experience is figure out, well, what does that mean from a marketer's perspective? And what does that mean from a customer's perspective? And so this is where I like to use user stories. A user story is a simple sentence that's, as a persona, I want to sow that. Persona being the audience, want to being the intent, and sow that being the outcome. And so as you're moving through each phase of the customer journey, you can think about it as a marketer, I want to do this thing, but then put yourself in the shoes of the customer and say, as the customer or as the audience, I want to do a thing. And what you'll find often is that the outcomes are very different because you need to know what the audience wants, but also what your goals are as the marketer and figure out how to put those two together. And that's what we're going to walk through in the next set of slides, is walking through every phase of the customer journey from the perspective of the marketer and as the audience member. And this is where the worlds that Brooke and I live in start to come together. So if we start at the top with awareness, the user story from the marketer's perspective could be, as a marketer, I want to create content so that consumers can learn about me. And this is what you as the marketer are likely doing so that people can understand who you are, what services you offer, the history of the company. But you need to keep in mind that the consumer may not even be at that point yet. So as a consumer, I want to do internet research so that I can answer my questions. So look at the disconnect there. You want consumers to learn about you and immediately buy your stuff, but they're not ready. They still have questions. They may not even know what their questions are. So Brooke, what are the digital touch points at this stage?
Yeah, I like to think of the awareness stage as like at the point at which a potential customer, right? So we're talking about those pre-purchase people, realize that they need something, right? Maybe you want to go get rid of your car and ride a bike to work. Maybe you need another green jacket like this one, right? So I've realized that I've needed something, but I don't currently have it and I don't know where I'm going to get it. So what do? We start researching. We go to Google, we go to social, we ask our friends. We turn to the internet and we ask questions of our peers on social media a lot of the time. So in this stage, what we like to say is we're not trying to hard sell anybody here. If somebody comes through on, let's say, one of our social channels and asks a question about our green jackets, we want to give them information that they are seeking by asking some of those qualifying questions, having that wonderful conversation. But we're not like, do you want to buy it now? Do you? That's not what we want to be doing here, right? We literally just want to provide content on social or maybe through a different digital channel, have that conversation that answers that frequently asked question. And so that's why that was step one of that 5-step process. If you go through and you do an audit, and it doesn't have to be on your social channels, it can be through email, it can be through your toll-free number, talk to your sales team, talk to your customer service team, find out what those FAQs are, those frequently asked questions, and then you've got a whole list of content that you can create, whether it's snackable bites through social media or long form content for your blog or a service page. This is where I always tell people to start, especially if they're thinking about a social-led customer care program. What are those frequently asked questions that you're getting, and how can you best answer those that's concise, gives the exact information someone wants, shows versus tell if you can. And a lot of times what these FAQs look like in awareness stage, just based on experience, are things like tutorials, demos, spec sheets. Blog post is another big one. I can't tell you how many people have actually become aware of B Squared through our blog and then converted by, saying they wanted a free consultation. But that all comes through blog posts, and guess where those come from? A lot of our frequently asked questions. So it all kind of feeds each other if you're doing it correctly.
And, I can say for myself, but, raise your hand if you've ever gotten really impatient as a marketer and tried to skip directly from awareness to purchase and tried to do that hard sell. But then what ends up happening is you don't necessarily build that trust, that loyalty, that evangelism. You just have that one and done transactional relationship. And if you're trying to build all of the real customer care and customer experience, then you really should go through each of these phases in the correct way. So after awareness to that point comes consideration. And consideration is they've learned about you, they've become literally aware that you exist in the space, that you may have solutions for them, but they need more information. So the user story could go like this. As a marketer, I want to highlight my brand online so that potential customers can see how helpful my services are. This could be a testimonial, or this could be, other things that just you're not doing the hard sell. So try to sort of hold back from doing that at this stage, because as a consumer, I want to see customer testimonials so that I can narrow down my research. As consumers, we tend to, especially in the digital space, we tend to rely a lot on other people's reviews, good or
Mm.
bad. Does this product have 5 stars? Does this restaurant have good service? Did one person have a bad experience? Is that going to color the rest of, my decision making? So, Brooke, at the consideration stage, what are the digital touch points?
Yeah. So think about it naturally, how we progress. We're all consumers here, right? I assume pretty accurately, I think, that all of us have purchased something. So put yourself in the consumer's shoes, right? You've now become aware of potential areas where you can buy your thing, your green jacket. But you're going to go a little bit deeper into your research, right? For the most part, and depending on price point, we don't often become aware and then immediately hit that buy button unless it's maybe, a small priced item. So we're going to be looking at things like product reviews. We're going to be looking at things on social media, like the overall brand conversation. And this is why it's so important to remember that social media is a spectator sport. So the way in which you respond to requests that are coming through, including complaints, right? It could be retention. It could be a current customer on your social channels complaining about something, their green jacket came without a button. How you respond and how quickly you respond to that message, since it's out there for the world to see, is part of what happens during consideration for new customers. So I want you to think about that. This whole digital customer journey, as Katie mentioned earlier, feeds into each one of the stages. And if you do each stage to the best of the ability, right? We're still not selling in consideration. We're looking at the social conversation as a whole. We remember that how we're responding to current customer pain points affects this stage for new customers. Then we can build upon each stage better and faster and more efficiently.
So, Brooke, I know that at this stage, it's really important to, that your potential customers are looking at product reviews and Yelp reviews and Google reviews. What is your stance on only showcasing the positive?
I wouldn't do it because research shows that we want, as part of, consumer behavior when it comes to purchasing, we want to see some negative, because if it's 5 stars across the board, everybody's raving about it, we tend to start to have a little distrust creep in, right? So if you get 1 or 2 of those negative reviews, I'm at the camp, you can't please everyone all the time. Now, I only want it to be 1 or 2, or a very small percentage of the overall look of my reviews, because ultimately I want that 4 or 5 star total score, right? But I also want it to be truthful. So if someone does leave a negative review, definitely respond to that review and figure out how you can move it offline and help that person, because again, people are looking at that. That's part of the larger social conversation, review conversation, digital conversation that's happening during consideration. But then don't worry about it if they don't remove the review or change it, because a little bit of negative makes it real, right? It makes it feel a little more authentic.
A question that Chris has, which is a really good question, especially at this consideration phase, is how do you feel about your competitors basically spamming, your business and your products with negative reviews so that they're not shown by the algorithms?
Yeah. I hate that personally as a marketer. It sucks, to be quite honest. There are some supposed programs that clean it up. I don't know. This is probably a great question to go back to you, Katie. Are there, artificial intelligence AI type of bot software that's coming available or that is available now that can actually go through and kind of see what's authentic and not and remove it? I don't know. One of the other things I'll say really quickly with review sites, depending on the platform, as you may know, if you have your own reviews for your own company, they're very strict about what they leave up and what they take down. So a lot of times you'll have to request to have something taken down. And to do that, it must violate the terms of service for that particular platform, which is difficult. And then, to combat that, some people say that they don't have reviews on, which I also don't agree with. So it's a tricky road to travel. I don't know do you know any software or AIs or bot things that can combat this?
So you just said two really important things. Number one was authenticity, and number two was the terms and service. And so if you start with the authenticity, Google is, they've been developing a lot of their own AI software to take down obvious AI written content. Now that's from, search in general. I would imagine that that extends to reviews, especially Google My Business, those kinds of things. But really it's figuring out the authenticity, what's written by an AI versus what's written by a human. And that is going to become harder and harder to pick apart as we go on. So then you move on to the terms and service of a site or of your own brand. And that's where you still have to have that human intervention to say, this is something that we feel comfortable leaving up. This was obviously, a spam bot, and this is someone who really, we just need to help offline. And so you still need that human intervention. So AI can identify negative reviews. You can, program your code or your software to do that, but then you as the human still have to decide what to do with that information.
And my advice there is, again, respond to everything. Even if you think it's a spam bot, you could say, hey, as a brand, as the Green Jacket brand, we think this is spam, but we're responding because we want to thank you for your review. If it's not, or if it's a pain point, we'd like to speak to you offline. You can email us or call us here.
Mm-hmm. And so after the consideration phase is the evaluation phase. So you've started to build that deeper relationship with a potential customer. Now, keep in mind, they're not a customer yet. They're still trying to figure out whether or not you provide the right kind of thing to solve their problem. And if the consumer really knows what their true problem is. So the user story could go like this. As a marketer, I want to drive repeat traffic to my website so the potential customers can start making decisions. And so this is your returning users. This is the stickiness of your website. This is making sure that the content on your website is helpful and educational and engaging and answers common questions. So think about that FAQs that Brooke was talking about earlier with, putting that information out on social and an email and different channels to even make people aware of you. You can start to bring that content into your website to say, this is what we do, this is how we help you. Now, on the flip side of that, as a consumer, I want to find specific content on a website so that I can see if the service meets my needs. Mm-hmm. Remember that at the end of the day, it is not about you, the marketer, and what you want. It's about the consumer and what the consumer wants. So whatever meets the consumer's needs is what they want right there and then. And if it's not you, they will move on. So, Brooke, what are the digital touch points at the evaluation stage?
Yeah, I actually have a little anecdote here. We work with a large billion-dollar tech brand, and we asked their C-suite as we started working with them, how much of the social chatter during your digital customer journey do you think is kind of awareness, consideration, really an evaluation, like in that buying moment? How much of that chatter do you think is happening on your social channels? And they said about 0 to 5%. So we started doing a project with all of our clients where we started tagging all of the incoming conversations through social channels as acquisition or retention, meaning are they pre-purchase or are they post-purchase, right? Are we selling or are we supporting? And what we found with every single client was that at least 20% of the social chatter was acquisition, meaning in this evaluation stage, in that buying moment. And some product lines with this tech client in particular have over 75% acquisition chatter. So what does that mean? It means that we now know, based on the voice of the customer, what they're looking for in the evaluation stage. So we are now working with their sales team to create more nurture content that specifically answers those evaluation questions that we see popping up in that acquisition chatter. So in some situations, and again, depending on the brand, this could be watching product videos or asking for demos. That's showing versus telling. Budget is a really important part of evaluation. So a lot of the questions that we get during evaluation are price comparison questions. They'll actually come to us and they'll say, hey, your competitor's printer has all the same features and costs $50 less. Why is that? You would want to be ready for an answer for that type of question because remember, everybody's watching. So price sheets that you can come up with would also be important here. Charts, any kind of information where you can differentiate your brand because that's essentially what's happening. I like to think of evaluation as like I've shortlisted all of the research that I came up with and I took it down from 10 potential places to buy from to 2 or 3. This is my short list. Now I'm going in and I'm asking those deeper questions. I'm deciding to buy based on price, maybe if budget's my primary driver. Or in some cases, like on the very first or second slide that we saw, some people will do it based on, where the brand stands or how they give back their corporate social responsibility initiatives. So these are things that you need to be ready to answer. It's a little bit deeper than FAQs, but we still include this with FAQs because really what we're trying to do is get a handle on all of the different questions that come in through the digital customer journey.
It is interesting where you start to see those little tiny details that make or break someone's decision to actually buy from you. And so, Brooke, to your point, really doing your due diligence to make sure you are answering as many questions as possible so that you are, the brand that someone decides to go with. It could even be the speed at which you're answering questions that
Yes.
someone, uses to make. So maybe it's between you and, your competitor. They happen to answer the question 30 seconds faster than you. That could be the deciding factor, which is, it makes you crazy as a marketer, but those are the things that consumers are judging their decisions based on.
Yeah, I love that you say that because there's a lot of different research out there on response times, especially for social media. On average, most of the research supports that consumers expect a response with under 1 hour on social media. And we all know that social media lives 24/7, weekends, holidays. So it's a lot of pressure on marketing teams to be able to answer within that hour that's expected. But that's where we live now, right? Everything's moved to digital. More people are shopping and buying and researching online. So the quicker you can get with your responsiveness, especially in the evaluation stage, I think will help you with converting those potential customers to actual customers.
So Carol has a question. Where do you stand on publicly sharing pricing on your website? I can tell you from my experience, like I do have mixed feelings about it, but I think that, standalone consumer products, there's no reason not to. But when you start to get into the services industry, like, my company and Brooke's company, it's a little bit more tricky because unless you have standard, boxes of this is exactly how this looks, the pricing is really going to be a range. And even those ranges, I think that's okay to share. But keep in mind that your competitors are looking too.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Brooke.
No, I was to say that's a great question. This is something I've been noodling on myself. So a very timely question. Thank you for asking. Just like Katie said, everything we do is so custom in the service world, right? It depends on which platforms you're using and what you want here. And do you want to add social listening, right? So there are no set prices. What I've been toying with for our website as a service-based company is having a pricing page, but kind of saying something along the lines of, hey, our pricing is custom. Here's why, some information, and then saying typically engagements with B squared, start at X and go up from there. I'm thinking about doing something like that and just testing out how that works for us in the evaluation stage, because in working on these in our own digital customer journey and in talking to Katie a lot about our digital customer journey, I do feel like we're missing some of those evaluation pieces. So that is one piece that I want to test.
Well, so Brooke, this is an excellent segue into purchase. So ta-da, you made it. Someone
We
bought
made
that.
it. It happened.
It happened. And quite honestly, this is where a lot of marketers, or actually a lot of companies, stop their digital customer journey. Now, it could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe it is a very transactional, type of business. My co-founder, Chris, often gives the example of, oh gosh, what does he say? Something along the lines of buying like an airplane hangar. Like it's something that you're only ever going to buy once. And so you don't need to, continue to sell the same thing over and over again. So that's, obviously a little bit of an outlier, but think about it from the terms of the marketer and consumer. So the user stories could go like this. As a marketer, I want to drive users to the purchase page so that conversion numbers increase. Makes sense.
Sounds about right.
Yep, sounds about right. I mean, and quite honestly, but this is what happens. I just want to sort of do the caution that a lot of companies try to drive unaware audiences directly to that purchase page without giving them information in those first three stages. And so, yes, at the end of the day, we can all admit a business is about making money. We can't be afraid to admit that. That's what we need to do. The way in which we get there is going to dictate how much money we're able to make. And so think about it from the side of the consumer. As a consumer, I want to have an easy route to purchase so that I can solve my problem. Now, Brooke, I'm going to have you talk about the digital touch points, but I can say as a consumer, how many times have you gotten stuck in some sort of a cart or registration or something, and you just can't get through and you just keep getting error messages? So I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to set you up for a softball, Brooke. How important is customer experience at the purchase stage?
So important. And I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about as marketers, right? Because we're all consumers, and I'm assuming that a lot of us are on this today, are marketers, is how much purchasing is now taking place online, right? So a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, moved to some sort of e-com, right? Where you could purchase their products through a digital space. And that's wonderful. And I think that's where we'll continue to go. One-click buying has revolutionized the way we shop. It's made us shop more. But I also think that we forget from the marketer side that we want to ensure that our customer experience in the purchase phase is still going off without a hitch. We don't want problems when someone's purchasing. So under touch points, thinking about that digital purchase, can customers easily create an account? I have stopped buying a lot of times because it was so difficult to even just create an account. I love if I'm going to buy something one-off, I love when they have continue as a guest, right? I want to say this really quickly too. A lot of people think about customer experience as rolling out the red carpet at each one of these stages and throwing some sort of like fanfare for your customer at each one of these stages. And that is not scalable, and it's scary. And I would like for us to stop trying to do scary stuff as marketers, because it's scary enough to live in our world. So instead, I want you to think about customer experience as about, this is the path to purchase, everything that we're talking about today. And all you want is a smooth path. You don't want any potholes on that road. What do they say? The best flights are the boring ones. We want a boring flight path, okay? So in the path to purchase, what that means is to try to reduce the amount of potholes, reduce the friction. How can I have a boring flight from the point where they put that thing in their cart to checkout? So can they create that account easily? Can they log into their existing account easily? I do not remember passwords well. This will trip me up as a purchaser online. Can they add carts to their shop, add items to their shopping cart easily? Are there options for upselling and cross-selling without being annoying? So a lot of times, like, I hate to always use Amazon as a great example, but they are, because you'll see when you buy something on Amazon, it'll say something like, people who purchase this item also frequently bought XYZ, right? That's frictionless. That's making it easier to upsell without being annoying, because if you're like, oh yeah, I need the green belt to go with the green jacket, click, you've just upsold without being annoying, right? Easy path to purchase. And then obviously thinking about any sort of like discounts or discount codes you have. People, marketers, are still using those like long, crazy, hairy, weird codes. Like, just make it spring save or spring 22 or something easy that people can apply the discount to. And if you're using a digital wallet, right? So if you really are an e-com brand, I forget the name of the software now, which is going to drive me crazy. I'll try to remember and I'll pop it in the chat. But it's literally, once I put my email or my phone number in, this software that e-com providers are using recognizes my phone number and my email and automatically populates my shipping address, billing, obviously not credit card information, but all of that other time-consuming information that I have to fill in is filled in for me. That is excellent, especially for an e-commerce brand, because that makes a boring flight, and we want that boring flight so that we can make our purchase and hopefully move on to loyalty or evangelism.
So Chris has a question, which I think is a good question. It's if everything is boring and smooth, how do you differentiate yourself as a marketer? I think, so I was going to say, I think the way that we're speaking about it is the path to purchase, to get from A to B, is the boring part. That's the smooth part. It's how you differentiate is the value of the product, the value of the service, the quality of care that you put into crafting this thing specifically for your customer. As a customer, I want a simple and boring and smooth purchase process, but my expectation of what I'm getting is really, really high. And that's actually a really good segue into ownership, loyalty, and evangelism. But Brooke, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree. I think the path to purchase should be smooth and boring, where you get to have that pizzazz and where you get to differentiate. Obviously, products can be the same. Pricing can be super competitive. Don't compete on price. That's my advice there. But really, where you get to differentiate and where it's so easy, it's literally easier than ever to differentiate here right now, is what we're talking about: the customer experience, customer care, and those conversations that you're having with people as they make their way through the digital customer journey. That's where you have the personality, the pizzazz, the responsiveness, the actual answers, the authenticity, all of those things that we're talking about that lead to good CX or good customer success. That's where you differentiate. If that path is easy, and then you've got this cool brand that people want to align with, it sounds hard, but it's not, and not enough people are doing it. So in my mind, if you can get those two things done, you can definitely differentiate.
And the other way to differentiate is to not stop at purchase, but to keep moving on to ownership and loyalty and evangelism. And you're automatically going to be differentiated because, again, as we've mentioned, a lot of companies stop at purchase and then they're like, well, I got the money. I don't care what happens to the customer after that. So in the ownership, it's the step immediately after purchase. So the user story for the marketer could go like this. As a marketer, I want to have a feedback loop so that I can resell and retain my customer. Now, business school 101, it's less expensive to retain customers than it is to onboard new customers. And so if you can keep a customer longer term, resell them, it's going to be much easier because you don't have to then re-go through awareness, consideration, and evaluation. They already know who you are. They already know what you offer. But as a consumer, here's what's going on in their head. As a consumer, I want to get instant support so that I can use what I just purchased. And so look at the differences there too. So as a marketer, I'm already thinking about the next sale. I'm already thinking about what other money can I get from this customer. But the consumer's like, hey, I just bought this thing and it's got like 800 plugs and switches and, pieces. I don't know what to do. Stop trying to sell me more stuff. Just help me with what I have. So, Brooke, what do we do at the ownership phase?
Yeah, I love that you said a lot of people skip these steps, or sometimes they even go from purchase straight to loyalty and forget about ownership. And you really have to have the foundation of ownership to get to loyalty, in my opinion. There's an anecdote I have here too. We work with a luxury appliance brand, and they released like this really very amazing, but also very expensive cappuccino machine. And as we were helping them with our customer care, we kept seeing over and over again that there was negative conversation happening around the coffee filter, the filter that you had to change in this cappuccino machine. And we went back to the client and we said, hey, we're having some ownership problems with the filter. What should we do? How do you handle this? What content do you have to support ownership? And they told us, oh, every machine comes with a manual the size of like a Shakespearean novel. They can just go to page 457 and find out how to change the filter. And we were like, how about no? Like, this is a luxury product. No one wants to dig out the manual. They might have even thrown out anyway. Flip to page 468 and figure out how to change the filter. Why don't we show versus tell? So what we suggested to them was creating a video that would live on the product page, showing people how to change the filter. And what we saw happen in the 6-month period after this video got released is not only did the negative chatter go down about this new product line, the positive chatter went up, meaning like peer-to-peer recommendations, which then hopefully lead to, like we talked about in the flywheel, bringing new customers into the fold and awareness and the other stages. So I think ownership is hugely important. Again, as we move to more of a digital world, having that paper manual is not going to cut it. So actually one of the things this brand is doing is creating a digital library as well as an app where people can go in and find more information about their product, how to use it, how to fix it, those types of things. So this is something to think about in ownership. You want to think about it if the order was fulfilled correctly. How did shipping and delivery go? Online real-time tracking, do you offer that? I think that's cool, because me personally, when I order something online and then they give you the little tracking thing, I'm like clicking that link every day to see when my thing is going to show up if it's not next day from Prime. And then you want to think about post-purchase support. Your online customer support. Do they call your phone number? Do they go to your website and want to talk to a chatbot or an agent? Do they go to social media? More and more people are using social media as a customer support channel. So are you able to support them there? What kind of FAQs do you have for ownership, right? When somebody can't use their product correctly, do you have instructions and assembly guides you can send links to that are digital? And then don't forget about, like I just mentioned, chatbots and assisted chat, follow-up emails, social media interactions. There's so many things to think about in ownership that it kind of makes me sad that it's like the redheaded stepchild of the digital customer journey. Like, it's really a very important stage to get to loyalty, in my opinion.
As the person in my household who is responsible for reading instructions for the variety of things that my husband likes to buy that we then have to assemble, I can speak firsthand experience about, really bad instruction manuals. And then, Travis had mentioned, and so did Carol, having to go to YouTube to find somebody else's video of how to use the darn thing.
Crazy.
How do you put it together? I can't even remember the number of times something has shown up at my house and the instruction manual is either a Shakespearean novel or it's 3 steps and it's just a picture and it's like, here, this is what this thing is supposed to look like.
Good luck to you. We have your money. We don't care. That's how I read that sentiment personally as a consumer. I did it last night, by the way. I was trying to figure out how to do the automatic coffee pot, like the timer on the coffee machine. I couldn't find a video anywhere on Cuisinart, so I had to go to some person's video on their YouTube channel about how to do it, and I still didn't do it right. But anyways, yeah, this is a true pain point. Ownership needs a lot of love, in my opinion, from brands when we're talking about the digital customer journey.
So with that, Brooke, um, if you don't do the ownership stage well, you don't then get to loyalty because you, as the marketer, may be trying to move people through every phase, but the consumer may stop at that ownership and say, I am never purchasing from this brand again because I couldn't figure out how to use the thing. I couldn't get to customer support. I couldn't get the help that I needed. And then for them, their journey stops. For you, loyalty is where you would then start considering reselling, considering upselling. And so again, sort of highlighting the mismatch of where we as marketers think the customer is versus where they really are. So in loyalty, the user story for the marketer could be, as a marketer, I want to incentivize customers to stay long term so that they can help us sell more. Whereas the consumer, as a consumer, I want to have reasons to stay engaged with a brand so that I can get deeper insights into my solutions. Literally tell me how to clean the coffee maker. Literally tell me how to program it for 5 o'clock in the morning so that I'm not fumbling with, beans and hot water and all that sort of stuff. So, Brooke, what are the digital touch points at the loyalty phase?
There are so many digital touch points here. Loyalty programs, personalized rewards, customer newsletters, private public communities, social media-led customer support, groups. There's a lot of different ways you can go with loyalty, but I think the most important part, no matter how you decide to manage your touch points, is that creating loyalty truly in this stage needs, and you need to establish as a brand that emotional connection. So this is, again, one of those key moments that I feel not enough brands are capitalizing on. They're not building those authentic conversations with the owners, customers, right now they're owners. And this is when you should be checking in on the relationship, right? This is like a free pass to be annoying, right? To have those touch points and check in. Are they receiving the value that they expected from the brand at every touch point? This is where, when you start to understand who has loyalty to the brand, you can have a little bit of that deeper conversation. Like, hey, Katie, listen, I've seen that you've, bought the green jacket 3 times now. Can I just chat with you for like 30 minutes? And in a return, I'll give you a 20% off coupon for your next green jacket purchase. But I just want to understand, like, what happened at all the stages? Were there any potholes that you found on that path to purchase? How can we better serve you next time? Why do you keep purchasing green jackets over and over again, right? All of these wonderful voice of the customer data points that we can collect in lots of different ways to then help us decide how to build out our loyalty programs, rewards programs, whatever it may be. And once you start to build, a group of Katies, I go from 1 Katie to 10 Katies to 100 Katies to 1,000 Katies. Think of how much information it's going to require, that conversation, but how much information I'm now getting from people who I want to buy, to continue to buy from me, right? I've got all access to all of those Katies, 1,000 Katies telling me exactly what's going to make it better. Why wouldn't I listen to my group of Katies and then make those changes along the digital customer journey? Seems easy, right?
1,000 Katies is a terrifying thought, but I can tell you this Katie probably bought the jacket 3 times because she couldn't figure out her ding-dang coffee maker and kept spilling it all over her green jacket, just to tie it all together. But once you've figured out what's going on and you've, talked with the person, you've really heard them, you said, did my solution actually solve your problem? This is when you can move into the evangelism stage, which is not the last stage. It's a continuous cycle, but for the purposes of this, it's the last stage for one individual person. So evangelism is when people start, in some ways, becoming part of your sales team because they are the people who love the green jacket. They are the people who have created the explainer videos, and they help you sell the thing more because it's more scalable when you have this community of people who are loyal and feel ownership over the thing that they purchased. And then they're also spreading the word of your brand, of the green jacket. So the user story for a marketer could go, as a marketer, I want to activate my loyal customers so that they can attract more awareness to my brand. So, Brooke wearing the green jacket everywhere for the brand, I'm going to say, hey, Brooke, I love that green jacket. Where did you get it? She's going to say, this is a great green jacket. I've bought 3 of them. Let me tell you where I got it. As a consumer, I want to join a brand community so that I can find like minded people who share my views about a brand. I want to figure out where Brooke is getting her fashion advice to find the green jacket so that I can get more things like that. So, Brooke, at this evangelism stage, what are the digital touch points?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I want to mention here is when we talk about ownership, loyalty, evangelism, sometimes in purchase, right? But more so in these 3 stages here, this is where user-generated content starts to show up. And this is so important for brands to use because, again, it's that peer-to-peer recommendation versus, the brand touting how awesome their green jackets are. And what these 3 stages do are help feed awareness. As Katie said, the Green Jacket Club is recommending green jackets to people who haven't purchased. But also any of that user-generated content that starts to show up under ownership, loyalty, and evangelism goes into that consideration and evaluation stages. So again, I just want to make the point or drive the point home that the journey is a circular path. It's not a straight road. And truly, we could have lines going through the middle to all of the different stages and how they help build upon one another. But evangelism is what I would call like the North Star, right? Loyalty is kind of, I feel like, also where a lot of brands stop. But if we can go into evangelism, we're just helping fill that self-propelling momentum in the flywheel through our customers, voice of the customer data, customer care, all of those things. So when I think about evangelism, this is where I would want to start to understand who are my group of best customers. And out of that group, how many of them are those mouthpiece people online, right? So you may not even have a community yet, but if you can see that Katie has purchased 3 green jackets and Katie's going on to social media channels and sharing user-generated content of her and her green jacket and telling people how amazing the fabric is or how much she loves the color or whatever it may be, I need to start to use that voice of the customer data to bring Katie into the fold. She already is an evangelist, but how can I help support her, right? Because we want her to continue to be that word of mouthpiece for the brand. So how can I move her from a best customer who's very vocal on digital to a brand advocate, or maybe even a community leader? If I don't have a community yet, and again, I pinpoint 5 Katies, could those 5 Katies not help me form a community of the green jacket posse and help me bring more people into the fold for awareness, consideration, evaluation, going, again, keeping that self-propelling momentum going? That's how I look at evangelism. It's like the stretch goal, right? Loyalty, that's fantastic. We could definitely stop there, but let's stretch it out, take it a little bit further and start to pinpoint some of those people who can help us, the marketers, the business owners, the people on the actual brand side. How can we bring in outsiders to help us propel things forward? Employees are an important part that I want to talk about with evangelism too, because so often they're overlooked. And you have an evangelist sitting there on your team who can also be a part of evangelism for your brand. So don't forget about employees.
And so, as we've been talking about the different stages of the customer journey, you may be asking yourself, how do I even know what the stages of my customer journey are? Well, there is no one size fits all. Every company's customer journey is going to look a little bit different. And so, one of the things that we do at Trust Insights, it's what we call a multi-attribution analysis. And so, as Brooke mentioned with the customer journey, it could be zigzagging all over the place. And what we know from our work in data analysis, but also just as humans, there's very few cases where a customer journey is completely linear, where someone immediately goes to awareness and consideration, evaluation, and purchase in a very clean, straight line. And so what a multi-touch attribution analysis does is it accounts for the passing back and forth of, well, I remember seeing this thing a couple years ago, and then I was going to purchase it, but then I totally forgot about it. I got distracted by something else, and then I came back to it, but then yeah, I forgot about it again. And so like it accounts for more of that human behavior. And so what you're looking at is just a sample of a multi-touch attribution by channel. So we've been talking about this in context of the digital customer journey. So think about your digital channels: email, organic search, referral traffic, organic social, paid social, affiliate, your owned, and so on and so forth. And so this is a sample of Trust Insights analysis for our own Trust Insights data. So as you can see, the channel that works the hardest for Trust Insights is email, which makes sense because that's the channel we spend most of our time on. If we dig down a step deeper, we can see specifically by source medium which email. So we have 2 separate newsletter assets in our collection. And so those are the ones that are working the hardest. We can see that Google search is also helping drive conversions to our website, and so on and so forth. This is all really good information. However, if you don't know where in the customer journey each of these channels falls, you may be getting the messaging and the content incorrect. And so while, yes, email is driving the majority of conversions for Trust Insights, what we actually see is email is not what's driving awareness. And so if we're using our email newsletters to say, this is who Trust Insights is, let us give you the history, the rundown, we're missing the mark because the email newsletter is not driving awareness. Someone has already become aware of our company before they even get to signing up for the email. Email falls more into consideration and evaluation and a little bit into purchase. So, Brooke, I know that we've been doing some customer journey reports for B Squared. What is your take on this information?
First of all, I'm obsessed with these reports, and what it has led to most recently, as I'm sure many of you are dealing with, there's a new social channel that pops up every day, and we just don't have the time. And it's about putting the right quality content on the right channels at the right time for the right audiences. And what Trust Insights helped us understand was that LinkedIn was actually our most important social channel, not only for the beginning stages, but also to get into some of those conversions, not necessarily purchases for us, but conversions that may lead to purchases. So what we decided to do was pull back on some of the channels that just weren't even making the mark on the report, that we were spending a ton of time on creating content and having conversations, but it wasn't driving the ultimate goal as a marketer of getting more of those conversions. So we actually put a pause on Facebook, Pinterest, and something else, which I can't think of right now. And essentially, we're putting most of our time and attention on social, on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I'll say they recommended that we do more email attribution stuff. So we started a LinkedIn newsletter, and within I think our second send had over 500 subscribers. So this report, which is based on some of the voice of the customer and the digital customer journey information that we've been talking about today, helped me understand as a business owner where to find the right people at the right time. And then obviously messaging is up to me to test.
So, Brooke, with the 90 or so seconds that we have left in this webinar, because I can't believe we've already been talking for an hour, clearly Brooke and I could talk about this forever. You started mentioning specifically social media. So what are some of those digital touch points in a nutshell on social media as we wrap up this webinar?
Yeah, I think we've talked about most of those touch points. And as Katie mentioned earlier, I don't know what your specific touch points are without being on the ground with you, which I'm happy to do. But I think ultimately what you need to start to think about is going through all of those touch points that we talked about today digitally, whether they're social or somewhere else, email, and start looking at the conversation that's happening there, right? What are those frequently asked questions that we're getting? Where is that happening the most? Katie's report can help you, or you can kind of go through and see, hey, really, it's only happening on email right now. Or, hey, no, it was on email. And now everybody's asking us questions on Facebook. Do we have a plan for having these conversations and taking care of the purchase customers and post-purchase customers on our Facebook channel. I think ultimately what you want to remember is that there are always going to be potholes on any road. But as the business owner or the marketing leader within your company, your job is to find them and fix them. And so in that regard, I would say, in looking at all of the conversation, where I would start and where I would spend most of my time, it's actually counterintuitive to what we marketers do, is look at the negative. I want you to be a negative Nancy. Start to understand where those negative conversations around that coffee filter are happening. Because if you can fix that pothole, make the path to purchase smoother, show everyone, it's a spectator sport, show everyone that you're listening and you fixed the thing, you're going to do much better getting that circular path moving for you.
And with that, if you have follow-up questions on what we talked about today, you can feel free to join the free Slack community, Analytics for Marketers, which is at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. And Brooke goes much, 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 much more in depth into customer care and the customer journey in her new book, coming soon, very, very soon, which you can get at the link below, which we will share with all of the registrants of this webinar. So with that, I know we were at the hour. If there are any additional questions, we're happy to cover them in the next few minutes. Otherwise, thank you all for joining our webinar today. Brooke and I were super excited to bring you this information and sort of merge our two worlds together in a really coherent way.
Yeah, just one more shout out for Trust Insights. As you already heard, we use them for the attribution report. We use them for some other data and analytics. And their attention to detail, the service is unmatched. The information is all actionable. So I highly recommend you, at the very least, go join their Slack group. If not, talk to them about how you can get your own attribution reports, because they are amazing.
Well, thank you for that, Brooke. And, we couldn't really do a lot of our, social media and advertising and those pieces without consulting you as the expert on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong as we are thinking about reaching our potential customers.
I know we're over time, but if there's any last minute questions and you want to pop them in, happy to answer real quick. If not, we will send out the replay and the slides and all the good things. Awesome. Looks like we're good. Well, thank you all so much, Katie. Thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you, Brooke. And we'll see everyone soon.